Okay, so I just told everyone in the class that. So sorry, I don't know what I swallowed wrong. I just told everyone in the class that I'm going to attempt to build this demo, but that I have in fact never done this specific animation before. So I usually practice these before I do them in class or make a video of them. But we're just going to go for it today and see what happens. So if I back up and have to retrace my steps a couple times, that's why. Okay, so the first step is to go back to this old exercise and basically export all of the individual components. Okay, so I'm going to begin with, I don't need that one at all. Let me get rid of that. Okay. So I'm going to start with the foreground and then move backwards. Okay, so foreground, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit export and I'm going to hit export as. And I want it to be a PNG file because a PNG file is capable of having an alpha channel. An alpha channel is another way of saying that it will have transparency as part of the image. And I'm going to say use artboard so that I get all of it. And then I'm going to say export. Now there are a couple things in this window that I have to make sure are correct. I'm going to say transparent instead of white. Has to say transparent. If it doesn't, you're going to mess this thing up pretty bad. The 300 pixels per inch, I think that's going to be high enough resolution. The trick to this is that when we convert this to an animation, it's not going to be at the same aspect ratio as this image we started with. So that's going to be a challenge all on its own that'll be fun to deal with in a minute. So, so I'm going to try 300 ppi and I think it'll be okay. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to save this to, oh man, did I already tell it where it was going? I sure did. Sorry. Export as. Let's see this one more time. Desktop, new folder. We're going to call this animation tutorial. Create, and we're going to call this foreground 01. Almost messed it up. I forgot to hit use artboard. Okay, so you need to do that with each one of the elements. So again, export as, use artboard, desktop, the folder you have selected. I'm going to call this one foreground 02. Aha, that's why. So in this particular instance, as I'm looking at my old exercise, I'm realizing that I didn't always bring these things to the bottom. And I think I want to do that just to be on the safe side because of the, oh man, because of the aspect ratio difference we're about to encounter. I'm worried that if I don't, I'll have trouble. So here we go. Export as, use artboard, desktop, animation tutorial, foreground 03. Nope. I'm calling this one sun instead of foreground. I'm going to call this one stars. And I'm going to call this sky, I'm actually going to call it background. And you know what? For the moon, as I recall, I made this white and then somewhat transparent. I'm going to undo some of that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to I think I changed the opacity. Is that what I did, or did I just make it a gray? Oh, okay. I guess it is. Let me see. No, there is an opacity issue there. Hang on, let me see if I can figure it out. No. Bless you.
Thank you.
Bless you again.
Thank you. Comes in twos.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Cool.
Interesting. Okay. I don't remember how I made this. Aha. That is so weird. Fine. All right. So what I did just then was I made sure that my moon was fully opaque instead of having any transparency, because I want to be able to control its transparency in the next program. That's all that was about. Okay, export as. And by the way, if you have the same problem I just did, I have no idea why the moon wasn't showing up as having a lightened opacity for me on the actual moon channel. But when I recreated it on a new channel, and I was able to see that it was the opacity was set to 39%, so I was able to jack it back up to 100%, and now it is fully opaque. And that was what I was hoping for. Okay, so export as desktop animation moon. Okay, now I'm going to get out of Illustrator. I'm going to open up a different program called Adobe After Effects. Now, generally the way that After Effects works is it's a video program. It's designed for making video. You can set the composition in After Effects to be basically any aspect ratio you want. So if you wanted it to be the size of a portrait sheet of paper, you could. But I think that for the sake of doing this particular animation that I have in mind, well, I'm going to leave it at a typical video aspect ratio. And so typical video aspect ratio is 16:9, and the most typical DPI or PPI settings are going to be uh-oh. I'm trying to make this this video of me doing this exercise at the same time I'm trying to do this, and I think that After Effects is about to tell me that that is not possible. But that's okay. We'll see what happens. So new composition. The most basic pixel dimensions are 1920 by 1080. That can be accomplished by simply selecting HDTV 1080 2997. That is the setting in After Effects that is most related to this. I'll be honest with you. Most of the time when I'm making things for my clients, that's the setting that I'll start with. When I'm making things for me, I typically do HDTV 1080 24 because 24 frames per second is more related to film than it's related to video, and I'm usually trying to make things that I want to look more filmic. And that is one of the easy ways to begin to accomplish that goal. Okay, so the default composition in After Effects is set for 30 seconds. I'm not sure that I need 30 seconds for this. Let's go with 15 seconds because I don't want this to be that long. And I'm going to leave the background color black, although I can make the background color anything I want it to be. Basically, the background is going to be transparent. Okay, now what I need to do is I need to get my elements in, the things that I exported, and I'm going to bring them in reverse order. So background first. And the first thing I'm going to do with this background is figure out from a scale perspective how big it is in relationship to my picture plane. And the way that I'm going to accomplish that is I'm going to open up the transform controls that are underneath the image in question. And so there's an option here called scale, and the scale is automatically locked so that the height and width change at the same time. And I have just found out that if I change it to 77%, it basically makes the image take up the screen. And so that's what I need. What I'm going to do for the sake of my animation, though, is I'm going to go ahead and scroll this guy up so that I'm basically seeing sunlight. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go from sunlight to nighttime. That's the idea. I want to eventually make this look like it's going from sunlight to nighttime. Okay, so I have my, the next thing that I should probably put in here is the sun. And I'm going to scale it to 77% as well, because now I know that 77% is probably going to be a reasonable setting to start with. You know what? I actually think that sun needs to be smaller based on these image dimensions, so I'm going to go with 65 and see what that looks like. I think that looks better compared with what I know is coming, so we'll move from there. Okay, so foreground, 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 and foreground. Okay. Some people doing this animation would probably say that I was crazy for bringing all those foreground elements in separately, that I probably should have just brought them all in at the same time. meaning just made one layer. But I'll show you why I did that in a minute. So I'm setting all these scales for these foreground elements to 77%. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is with the most foreground element, I'm going to reposition it. Oh, wrong way. And then I'm going to use its position to figure out where I want to put the position of each of these other things. The reason that I brought them in separately, this is the reason right here, is so that, is so that I could reposition these background elements, or foreground elements as the case may be, in a way that makes sense for this picture plane, for the difference in the composition of this landscape style composition versus the portrait style composition we had going on in our earlier piece. Oh, that is not what I meant to move. There we go. And when I get further into it, that's going to give me another thing that I can animate. You know, I can because I designed it this way, I'm going to be able to animate when each one of these layers changes from light to dark, and that's going to enable it to just have that extra element of verisimilitude in the animation. Okay, so here is where I feel like my starting point should be. Now, the way animation works in pretty much every program on the planet is by use of something called keyframes. So what I'm doing is I'm basically saying, hey, on this frame, this element needs to be in this position. By the time I get to this frame, the element needs to be in this other position. And that's all based on classic animation and the way that people would actually hand draw things on paper, keyframes, that is. And I'm sure we'll talk about that in the future, but what you really need to know for now is that I'm about to take the sky background thing and I'm going to animate its position over time. And so it's going to start with a position where it's at. And basically what I want to happen is by the time that I get to, say, something like 12 seconds, I want the position of it to have changed to where I'm seeing the night sky instead of the day sky. Oh, wrong thing. So what I'm doing right now is I've gone to 12 seconds and I'm moving this element until I see what I want it to look like at 12 seconds. And because I made a keyframe at the beginning, the program automatically generated a keyframe for me here at 12 seconds because that's where my cursor was at. Now, if I go back to the beginning, I will see my sky animate from daytime to nighttime. I hit the space bar to cause it to create a preview. Right now it's going to go a little bit slow, like it's been several seconds and we're just now getting up to 2 seconds. But once it builds the preview, it's going to be able to play this thing back to me in real time. So I got to let it roll one time through in order to generate the preview, and then it'll play in real time on the second pass. So that's what I'm waiting for right now. All right, so this time through, it's going to loop because that's how After Effects works. This time I'm going to be able to see it happen in real time. So we're going to see this thing go from the sky, at the very least, go from daytime to nighttime over the course of this 12-second interval, and then it should stay in place for a few seconds here at the very end. Okay, so I'm happy with that as a starting point for transition. The next element that I want to animate is the sun. So again, I'm going to start with its position at the beginning of my animation, and what I want it to do is I want it to completely set by the time I get to 12 seconds. So I'm going to go all the way up to 12 seconds after I've given myself this keyframe at the very beginning of the animation, and I'm going to move my sun so that it is set by the time we get to 12 seconds in. And now I'm going to watch that preview. Again, it's going to take a minute. Whoop, I hit save because that is my habit. Sunset animation. Let's put you on the desktop. An animation tutorial. Great. Okay. So it's building a preview for me. And again, once it finishes building the preview, it'll play it back in real time. All right, here it comes. All right. Now what I think I want to add next is I want to bring in my stars. So let's see here, stars. Now what I want to do with the stars is I don't want to move them. What I want to do with my stars is I want to make them invisible, and then I want them to gradually appear. We got to get them in position, though. All right, there we go. By the way, I'm constantly hitting save before I hit play every time. All right, should come back in real time this time. Here we go. So we're going from daytime, as the sun sets. About here, we're gradually going to be able to start seeing stars. And there you go. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my moon. I'm actually going to make the moon rise. Oh. One of the tricks is I want to make sure my cursor is on 0 before I bring any element in, because otherwise I'll have another problem that I don't want to show you right now or talk to you about. Just make sure your cursor's on 0 before you bring anything in. So I'm going to bring that moon all the way down. Oh, not scale, not rotation, position. Oh, and I do need to bring the scale down a bit, don't I? Okay, we'll do it that way. And actually, I kind of like the idea of the moon being in that shape. Oh! Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the moon behind the foreground elements so that I can animate it rising. And so I'm going to start its rising about here, about here, about here. So we'll say position, and we'll actually have it move just a little bit all the way through to the end. You don't have to watch it every time you make a change like this, but as I say, this is the first time I'm ever animating these specific elements together. I'm mostly going on gut as to how this should work, and I just want to look at the elements every time after I do anything to make sure that it feels like what I meant for it to feel like. We do have a problem that I just noticed too, by the way. I need to put my stars behind my foreground elements because I have some stars that are peeking through the mountains. All right, I'm just going to trust that that's right because it's going to take forever to load up a preview. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is I basically want to darken my foreground elements as they go. So in order to accommodate that, I don't actually have a transform control here that allows these things to go from the fully opaque color that they are to what I really want them to move to a darker color, is what I'm thinking would make this most look like it's moving from daytime to night, or at the very least desaturate them so that they're going from sort of a color to more of a grayscale kind of image, or even hint towards the purple, because something like one of those things is what's really going to sell this as animating from daytime to nighttime. So what I want to do is I want to add a color correction tool to each one of these things. So let's see what I got. I got a let me try color balance. That'll probably get it done. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, okay, so now that I've added that element on this first foreground, I have a transformation layer called effects, and it is specifically color balance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and give myself a keyframe for all of these colors, because I don't actually know which one I'm going to need in order to make it look the way I want it to look by the time it gets over here. So I'm gonna shoot for that 12-second mark again. for the most foreground element, but I'll probably make it further back in time for the others. Actually, you know what? I'll make it for 8 seconds for the most foreground element, and then do it over the 2 seconds for the others. That'll definitely work. Okay, so. Aha. Too much, too much. So it is it's the red balance that's going to give it to me what I want. Okay. Okay. So you can see how that's going to animate to a darker shade. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing on the next foreground element. What I'm going to do here is effect. Where did that go? Color balance. Can I just add that one here? Whoop! I got to have the right layer highlight. Got to highlight the right layer in order for this to do anything. Yes, there we go. All right, great. So same thing. I'm going into color balance. I'm going to give myself a keyframe on frame 0, and I'm gradually going to take the the hotness out of the color and try to add some coolness to this color. So I'm going to be able to do that with my blue balance and by taking out the red. That's too, it's too straight up blue. I want it to be more purpley than that. There we go. I needed to be bright enough for those cacti, I don't know how to say that, to still shine through. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the next one. I'm going to shoot for this one. Again, I'm going to give myself a keyframe at the very beginning for each one of these guys, and then I'm going to shoot for this changing by the time we get to second 9. We did the first layer at second 8, we did the second layer at second 8.5. This one we're doing at 9, so that by the time I get all of them to a cool color, and this thing converts to nighttime, the layers going from front to back will have changed more slowly than each other. And I think that'll be a cool looking effect. And I think that's all I need to do on that one. That worked. Okay, going to the next one. This will be 9.5 seconds. 9 seconds and 15 frames. Now I know I want the last one to happen at 12 seconds, and I actually made an error here along the way, and I did it on purpose so I could show you a trick. Let me get this last one looking the way I want it to look, and then I'll show you what the error is and how I'm going to fix it. Okay, the error is that on these effects layers, I realized that the last one I wanted to be at 12 seconds, and I did a miscalculation by setting the first few layers to happen in half seconds instead of full seconds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to number 4, and I'm going to grab these keyframes, and I'm just going to move them over to 11 seconds to fix that timing problem that I generated. And that's the reason that I did it, was so that I could show you that if you do generate a timing problem along the way accidentally, man, they're not that hard to fix. So I'm putting this one straight on 10 seconds. I'm going to put this one straight on 9 seconds, which I think it already is. Close. And I think the first one already is on 8 seconds. Yep. Okay, good. So now I'm going to let the program build me a preview after I hit save. And then once it's finished building my preview, I should be able to watch my fully completed animation. I think that second layer is a little bit too blue. I should probably go back and make it more purpley. But maybe I'll let you guys solve that on your own. All right, it should play back in real time on the loop. The loop's about to start here in just a few seconds. Here we go. There you go. All right. So now, here's the big trick to this thing. Most of you are probably used to some sort of file or edit command in order to generate your final file. That is not how it works in After Effects. How it works in After Effects is you go to Composition, and you're going to go to, oh man, where's that? Add to render queue, and then you're going to generate all of your settings for how you want this thing to output here. And I usually leave it on lossless and best settings, and then you have to tell it what the file name is going to be. So I'm going to call this Sunset 01. Now, I will tell you this. On the output module, rather than lossless, you could set it to all kinds of compression settings. Like you could make it all kinds of different things that would be more easy for transportability to other programs, or would generate a kind of file that would be more easily uploaded to the internet, so on and so forth. But I want a full resolution animation that's as good as it can possibly be, so that I can take it into another program and let so maybe this is going to be like the first piece of a larger video thing that I'm going to build, and I'm going to build the rest of it in a different video program like Final Cut or Premiere or something. And in that scenario, I want this to be as high resolution as it can possibly be now, so that when I take it over to the other program, I can let it deal with all the compression settings. So I hit render. Render is the key button you have to hit in order for this to output to a final file. So I hit render. As soon as it finishes rendering, it'll do this little chiming noise, and then I'll be able to open up the final file on the desktop. Thought I was lying about the chiming noise, didn't you? So here, it generated a .mov file. I'm going to open that with QuickTime. Interestingly, the newest version of QuickTime does not see the output module for After Effects, so it's got to convert it before it can play it back, which I just think is hilarious. All right, here you go. And that is a final video file being played back on the computer. I should probably put my stars behind my sun, because now that I'm seeing it large, I see that there's a mistake right in the middle of that sun, where you can see as the stars start appearing, they're on top of that darn thing.
See you Tuesday. Yeah, I see it.
All right, see you next time.